This is the story of a man who won 5 Olympics, saved dozens of lives, became Hollywood's most iconic Tarzan, and died nearly broke despite earning millions. His name was Johnny Weissmuller, and the secret of his birth stayed hidden until after he died. Johnny Weissmuller's entire life rested on a lie, carefully maintained and perfectly executed. Born in Windber, Pennsylvania, American citizen, eligible for the Olympics, the official story he told everyone turned out to be completely false. June 2, 1904, in Freidorf near Timișoara, a region that belonged to Austria-Hungary at the time and sits in Romania today, Johann Peter Weissmuller came into the world. 3 days passed before his baptism into the Catholic faith, and his parents Peter Weissmuller and Elizabeth Kirsch raised him as Bonnet-Swabians, which meant they were ethnic Germans living in Eastern Europe. 7 months after his birth, the family packed everything and left for America. The SS Rotterdam departed from Rotterdam on January 14, 1905, and 12 days later the ship pulled into Ellis Island. Windber, Pennsylvania became home, and that's where Peter Jr. arrived on September 3, 1905, which made him something his older brother could never be, a U.S. citizen by birth. 1924 rolled around and Johnny Weissmuller had turned into the fastest swimmer alive. The Olympics were calling his name, but one problem stood in the way. Competing for the United States required proof of citizenship. His father had never finished the naturalization process, and Johnny's first breath had been drawn in Romania. The solution they came up with was simple but illegal. The brothers essentially traded identities. Peter's Pennsylvania baptismal records became Johnny's ticket to a U.S. passport, and you can still see the evidence if you examine the church records today. Petrus Weissmuller appears on the page with John squeezed between the first and last name in different ink and different handwriting, while Peter took on the role of the Romanian-born sibling. Nobody caught on. Decades rolled by, and in 1950, Windber went so far as to grant Johnny a delayed certificate of birth for Petrus John Weissmuller, which just buried the false identity even deeper. 60 years passed before the truth came out, and even Johnny Jr. didn't learn about his father's real birthplace until giving interviews after the old man died. 5 gold medals for the United States, all won by someone who was never technically an American citizen. Hardship marked Johnny's childhood in ways that would have destroyed most athletic careers before they started. 9 years old, and he contracted polio, the disease that crippled thousands of kids and turned muscles to mush and ended dreams of running or jumping or swimming before those dreams could even form. Swimming became the doctor's prescription, a way to rebuild what the disease was tearing down. The prescription worked better than anyone imagined. 11 years old, and Johnny lied about his age to slip into the YMCA, which wouldn't take anyone younger than 12, and from the first day in the pool, he dominated every race they put him in. His father walked out when Johnny hit 8th grade, just disappeared one day and never looked back, but the swimming continued. 1920 brought legendary coach William Bachrach into the picture at the Illinois Athletic Club, and Bachrach would later guide the 1924 and 1928 U.S. Olympic teams after he spotted something extraordinary in this skinny Chicago kid. Brutal training sessions under Bachrach turned Johnny into something nobody had seen before. July 9th, 1922 changed everything. 18 years old, and Johnny Weissmuller stepped up to break Duke Kahanamoku's world record for the 100-meter freestyle, and when the clock stopped it showed 58.6 seconds, the first human being to cover 100 meters in under 1 minute. That was just the beginning, though. One loss to Ludi Langer in the 1921 440-yard freestyle, and then nothing. Johnny never lost another race and walked away from amateur competition with an unbeaten record intact. 67 world records fell to him by the time he hung up his competitive suit. The 100-yard freestyle record he set in 1927 stood at 51.0 seconds, and nobody touched it for 17 years until Alan Ford finally broke through in 1944. 52 United States national championships went on his shelf, and when 1950 arrived, the Associated Press looked at half a century of swimmers and named him the greatest of them all. Polio at 9, fastest human in water by 18. Training for the Chicago Marathon on July 28, 1927, should have been just another day. But Lake Michigan had other plans. Half a mile off North Avenue, A sudden squall caught the steamboat favorite and flipped the passenger vessel on its side. Dark water swallowed dozens of people who started screaming and drowning and grabbing at anything that might float. Johnny and his brother Peter saw it happen and didn't waste time thinking. They went in, pulled people from the wreckage again, and between them, they dragged approximately 24 survivors to safety. 11 people made it because of what the brothers did, but 27 still died that day. 16 children, 10 women, 1 man, and the number would have climbed much higher without the Weissmuller brothers in the water. Chicago handed Johnny the key to the city, not for his Olympic medals or his world records, but for saving lives when death was calling their names. 2 days later, still traumatized and running on empty, Johnny Weissmuller won the Chicago River Marathon anyway. 35 years would pass before a letter arrived from one of the women he'd saved, thanking him for the life she got to live, the husband she got to marry, the children she got to raise. Paris in 1924 turned Johnny Weissmuller into a sensation that echoed around the globe. Gold in the 100-meter freestyle, gold in the 400-meter freestyle, and he anchored the 4x200-meter relay team to another gold before picking up bronze in water polo. For medals from a single Olympics, Amsterdam in 1928 saw him come back stronger. The 100-meter freestyle title stayed in his hands, and he anchored another relay team to gold in the 4x200 meters. 6'3" and 190 pounds of what everyone called the ideal swimmer's build, broad shoulders, narrow hips, wingspan longer than his height. Every single one of his 5 Olympic swimming golds set new Olympic records. Summer heat filled the Hollywood Athletic Club in 1931 when screenwriter Cyril Hume noticed a crowd forming around the pool to watch one swimmer cut through the water. Hume was deep into the script for Tarzan the Ape Man at the time, and watching this Olympic champion move through the pool showed him exactly what he needed. One problem stood in the way. BVD Underwear had Weissmuller locked into a contract. MGM found a solution that only Hollywood could dream up, getting their biggest stars like Greta Garbo and Marie Dressler to pose in BVD advertisements in exchange for Johnny's freedom. 12 Tarzan films between 1932 and 1948, 6 from MGM and 6 from RKO, turned Weissmuller into the character that millions of people still picture when they hear the name. 16 Jungle Gym movies followed over 8 years, plus 26 half-hour Jungle Gym episodes for television. The Tarzan yell became the sound everyone associated with him, though the real story behind it gets disputed depending on who's telling it. Johnny sometimes claimed the yell came from childhood yodeling, but sound recordist Douglas Shearer actually created it by recording Weissmuller's voice, manipulating the sound, and playing it backwards. World War II brought the yell to battlefronts when it got recorded and broadcast to soldiers for morale, and homesick troops kept requesting it. That same yell would end up saving Johnny's life years later in a way nobody could have predicted. 5 times Johnny Weissmuller stood at the altar. Bob Arntz became his first wife in 1931, and they split in 1933, but the second marriage turned into Hollywood legend. October 8, 1933 in Las Vegas, Johnny married Lupe Valles, the actress everyone knew as the Mexican Spitfire, because her temper and personality could explode without warning. Stormy doesn't come close to describing what their relationship turned into. Domestic violence got reported, public fights made headlines, and they filed for divorce 3 separate times before August 1939 finally ended it for good. December 13, 1944 brought news that Valles had died by suicide while carrying another man's child, and despite everything that had passed between them, Johnny served as a pallbearer at her funeral with genuine sadness weighing him down. Beryl Scott married him in 1939 and gave him 3 children, Johnny Jr. in 1940, Wendy and in 1942, Heidi Elizabeth in 1944, before tragedy struck in 1962 when a car crash killed Heidi. The marriage to Beryl ended in 1948. Aline Gates took him on from 1948 to 1962 for marriage number 4. Maria Gertrude Baumann became his 5th wife in 1963 and stayed beside him until death came in 1984. Cuba in 1958 meant a pro-celebrity golf tournament, but it also meant Johnny was standing in the middle of the Cuban Revolution at one of the most dangerous moments you could pick. Castro's guerrilla troops stopped his car, disarmed his bodyguards, and created the kind of situation where people vanished without a trace. Johnny stood up and let out his famous Tarzan yell. Recognition hit the rebels immediately, and they started shouting, "Tarzan, welcome to Cuba," instead of making him disappear. Safe escort to the golf course replaced kidnapping, and his granddaughter confirmed the story years later when it appeared in Johnny Weissmuller Jr.'s 2002 book Tarzan, My Father. Millions of people had been entertained by that yell, and now it had saved his life. Millions in earnings from his acting career should have kept Johnny Weissmuller comfortable for life, but several factors teamed up to destroy his financial security. 5 divorce settlements drained money every time he walked away from a marriage. Business ventures collapsed. The biggest wound came from the Tarzan films themselves. No residuals meant the studios kept raking in millions from those movies for decades, while Johnny saw nothing. 1973 found the greatest swimmer of his century, standing at the door of Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, working as a greeter alongside boxing legend Joe Louis. 2 American icons greeting customers just to keep bills paid. Both his hip and his leg broke in 1974, and his health started falling apart fast after that. Strokes hit him multiple times, stomach operations became routine, and his final years got spent sitting in bathing trunks while staring at a swimming pool he couldn't enter without nurses holding him up. 67 world records to his name. First human under 1 minute for 100 meters. Years without losing a single race. All of that ended with a wheelchair and water he couldn't touch. Pulmonary edema took Johnny Weissmuller on January 20th, 1984, 79 years after his birth. Valley of the Light Cemetery outside Acapulco, Mexico became his final resting place. 3 times the recording of his Tarzan yell played while his coffin descended, exactly as he'd requested, and Senator Ted Kennedy teamed up with President Ronald Reagan to arrange a 21-gun salute, the kind of honor usually reserved for heads of state, which put Johnny among the very few non-heads of state to receive that recognition. 1,500 Mexicans showed up for the funeral, many of them children, and even a chimpanzee named Samantha attended as the mascot of an associate who'd worked as Weissmuller's double. Hollywood celebrities stayed away though. Maria, his wife, came, but Lisa, his daughter, and other family members were absent. Common people who'd loved Tarzan mourned the global superstar, while the industry that made him famous sent nobody. Romania gave him birth. Pennsylvania became his claim. His brother's birth certificate got him to the Olympics. 5 gold medals. Went to a country that wasn't technically his. 67 world records fell. Freestyle races stopped beating him after 1921. Approximately 24 people got pulled from Lake Michigan, with 11 surviving because of him. 12 Tarzan films made him Hollywood's icon. Cuban rebels with guns got stopped by a yell. 5 marriages came and went. Bad business and divorce settlements wiped him out. Casino greeters replaced movie stars. Presidents honored his death, while Hollywood stayed home. Some champions start with every advantage handed to them. Polio hit Johnny Weissmuller at 9. His alcoholic father abandoned him in 8th grade. The wrong country claimed his birth when the United States needed proof, and he still became the greatest swimmer of his century. Every record stands verified. Every rescue got documented. Every moment happened exactly as the evidence shows. 60 years passed before the Olympics learned about the birth certificate deception. 2 days separated the Lake Michigan rescue from a marathon victory. 12 films echoed with the Tarzan yell that later saved him from armed revolutionaries in Cuba. And the greatest swimmer in the world spent his last years unable to enter a pool. Perfection doesn't drive the story. What someone can accomplish when circumstances try to define them and they refuse to accept it does the work instead. American Olympian wasn't supposed to fit him, but America's greatest swimmer became his title. Polio should have ended him, but the fastest human in water emerged instead. Movie stardom seemed impossible, but Tarzan turned into his legacy. Johnny Weissmuller lived an impossible life and made every bit of it real.